Welcome back and thank you for staying with Checkpoint. Now, President William Ruto has just finished a roundtable with journalists at State House, and they discussed a number of issues from the cost of living to the taxes, the finance bill, and that's what we want to dissect right at this moment. And joining me for that particular discussion is Gabriel Muthuma to my left, who is a political analyst. Next to him is Kevin Osido, who's the Executive Director, County Governance Watch. And of course, we have Professor Fred Ogola, who's a governance expert and equally a Director of Trailblazer Business Strategies. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
So perhaps I'll start with you. What are your thoughts? You knew it.
Very quickly, because we are actually trying to dissect the entire conversation that the president has. First of all, we start from what Leonardo da Vinci tells us, that sometimes simplicity is actually the ultimate sophistication. And I think what the president did was just to look at some of the things that have been making headlines and wanted to talk to his people, and that's exactly what he's done this evening.
All right. Osido, what did you read from that?
The president is struggling. And I think some of the areas within which I think he's struggling is communication, because he's really trying to let Kenyans understand work which in my view should be done by either his communications team or the people who sit at the apex of those ministries and departments and agencies, particularly the ministries. And so he's trying to look for responses and making it simple for the common citizen who apparently might not be very closely interested in the conversation, but is waiting for the end result in terms of how do I get money into my pockets and how do I get food on the table. And so maybe the other thing I think is the fact that he has grasp of issues. I like how he's able to even give examples of women in Kibra who are doing this and that. And I think that he probably needs a lot of data and research, which could be done, in my view, from a team like what the former president had, which is called the Presidential Delivery Unit, to be able to help crunch and effectively communicate what the president is doing. Because I think part of why he's struggling is because Kenyans are making a lot of noise. We want to know exactly what this is, but no one is giving those responses.
All right. Prof, do you share the same sentiments?
Well, I mean, he has a perspective, and I think that if I would just state exactly what I get from what the president said, that first of all, let us thank him, because he's the first president who ran looking for this position on economic narrative. And then he's also the first president sitting in State House explaining to Kenyans directly about his economic blueprint. Whether they understand it, whether it makes sense, whether it will work or not, he has done that. In fact, look at sitting there. Tell me, Kibaki could have never engaged you like that. Moi would have never even spent a minute explaining to you what he's trying to do in State House. And I think Uhuru Kenyatta would have spent not much time on Sunday evening sitting there to explain to you. So give credit to that. But nevertheless, the question remains that the president is more talking about the input, or what I call lagging variables, what he's trying to do, but Kenyans are waiting for what's called leading variables, which means what's the output. When I go to school, can I pay school fees? When I go to the kiosk, can I buy the food I need to buy food stuff? And when I go to hospital, can I afford medical bill? Those are the main things that Kenyans want to know. But whether he managed to do that or not, I think that many Kenyans can understand for themselves, because I'm not Kenyans, I'm a Kenyan.
All right. And of course, you've talked about the issues that Kenyans want to talk about, which is cost of living, taxes, and all that. And that's something that we so dominate that particular conversation. So let's start with the cost of economy, and specifically the Finance Bill 2023. Particularly, he talked about the 3% housing levy, which there has been public outcry about it. He said it's not a tax, it's just a contribution. Maybe you can...
And that's why I like the simplicity in it. My friend thinks the president is struggling. I don't think the president is struggling. He actually came out eloquently to explain that particular tax that you've talked about now. It's not a new thing. And what the president is trying to communicate really is that, yes, we have a problem. We have issues, but guess what? We have solutions. And those are the solutions that we must look deep inside and understand which solutions and to which problem are we going to right now capture as a matter of supreme urgency again and importance. So what the president has done when he talked about the 3% really, it is not a very foreign thing. Probably happening in Kenya, we may think, wow, this is very foreign. There's an example I'd like to give you, even though it's another jurisdiction, but most of our examples that we give, we try using this country as a benchmarking country. The United States.
All right.
No, the United States. They have something called the 401k. Those who've lived in the US will tell you the 401k, where I put in some money and my employer matches the very same thing. Now, contrary to what many people may think, that contribution actually goes into your pension. But when you talk about pension, do you know where that pension goes in the United States? It actually does a lot of things. Matter of fact, some of these monies we get as loans are directly captured from the federal government. And then when we pay back in interest rates, we are actually making those citizens multi-millionaires. And I think this is a shift that the president has taken. Let us do this. We have a situation here. And he talked about the 6 million people living in some informal settlements.
Yeah.
Now, it is very easy for me and you to sit here and say, why do we need to, why do we need, why should I, you know? I was telling my friend earlier on that I have never met anyone. And I actually told you I grew up in a settlement, an informal settlement like that, Mathare Valley to be precise. And anybody I know, any person that I have met, immediately you get some small money. The first thing you want to do for you and your children and your family is get them out of that environment. So what the president is saying, yes, you heard him say that the future is urban. So we have to ask as a country, as a people, do we want to go into this urbanization, which is being called the future, in slums? Yet we know that we can sacrifice. And I think this is what he's calling us to. We must sacrifice. All nations that I know at one point, whether you look at Singapore, China, the United States, there was a time these nations sacrificed, and they sacrificed greatly. So what the president is calling us to do is sacrifice. And it's a good deal if you look at it. At the grand scheme of things, when you put money in, you're told your employer matches another 3%. That money does not go back to them. Yes, it is not a tax because you have 4 ways, which the president has explained quite eloquently. You have 4 avenues that you can get that money back. What is there not to like about that plan, honestly? I am actually waiting to see whether these two friends of mine have
So let's hear them. You know, Osido, from what he's saying, it's a sacrifice. But
Yeah.
Kenyans have been sacrificing. You know, we've been sacrificing for resources, development projects. Let's not forget that. So here, the problem is not that Kenyans don't want to sacrifice. It's that we're already in a hole, you know? Things are already thick. You want us to get us to, you're digging the hole further. And that's what Kenyans are complaining about.
And that's where the mismatch, in my view, is. Because even talking about mismatch, this taxation is not new. If you look at the comparison with 2018 conversations on taxation, the Kenya Kwanza government is giving a double, because initially it was 1.5, and the proposal, because these are still proposals, is to more or less increase it to 3%, which is an additional 1.5%. Now, what the president emphasized is the 6 million jobless Kenyans. But I don't think he went into the details of why are they jobless. There has to be a reason. Now, if you look at the recently released economic survey, gave us a number of Kenyans, and in fact it said that the employment, that there were, I think about 709,000, rather 806,000 new jobs that were created. But we didn't see the response to which sectors are these that contributed, increased number of jobs. But if you went further and looked at other statistical data that is available within government, you realize that it is actually the informal sector that contributed more, almost 719,000 new jobs. Now you ask yourself, so who is in the informal sector that the president is referring to as 6 million, and why are they there? Now, part of those people are very well qualified and learned Kenyans, and they are not there because they can't find jobs. The environment for them to be able to get a job is not there. Coming just post-COVID-19, where companies were closed and of course people lost their jobs, what did government do beyond putting in place stimulus packages that largely was what we called kazi mtaani by former President Uhuru Kenyatta? The Kenya Kwanza government has not gone further to look at what are we doing with those people who are no longer receiving this kazi mtaani. Those are partly the 6 million that the president is talking about. Moving this forward, because I also heard him talking about, of course, sealing them from these informal settlements and all that. How about engaging with county governments and locking them in their counties so that we don't get people moving from West Uyoma, where I come from, to Nairobi and largely Kibra, And then we work with counties and lock them there. Put an industry in Siaya County, go to Murang'a and put an industry there, go to Kilifi and put an industry there, so that the people that the president is trying to excite and entice employers and employees to contribute jobs for them, basically contribute to a wider tax base, then now tax base, because now they have money in their pockets and they're also able to contribute to government plans. I think the housing tax is rushed. I think a noble idea, not properly thought through, which is partly why I think the president is struggling even to make it understandable to Kenyans. And I also think that there could be other ways of doing it. One, making it voluntary, so that you don't have to tell people, hii kitu itapita, na wabunge tushajipanga watapitisha, you know. Make it voluntary so that Kenyans begin to see the sense, like the good points that the president was talking about, and my brother Muthuma is spewing around, then can be synthesized and made understandable to even people like myself who might find it difficult to want to begin to contribute. How does a mortgage plan work, you know? How about engaging with financial institutions? Because again, people have asked, even if it is a saving, where will that saving go to? Because government is not clear around this additional funding that I am putting in this thing called the housing tax. Who is going to be saving this money for me? Okay. Can I trust this government with that particular saving? And then how long will it be? How about if I resign from my work tomorrow or anything happens? What happens to my next of kin? Are they able to access this funding? I think there is a lot that government can be able to do to make this understandable to Kenyans as opposed to rushing it. And I think I've also seen a number of employer institutions who are either, you know, threatening to strike because in the event that this passes, because it's not clear, it is not very easy to see at the tail end of it. And I also think that there could be other partnerships, particularly with the SACCOs, some of whom are already engaged in this particular process. You go to many towns around this country, you will see pieces of land that are being developed by SACCOs. How are they doing it? And how about if government can be able to come together and engage and partner with them and see how they can probably pilot, you know? Say, for example, you want to use even public sector alone just to pilot how this can be done. And then the next budget, you can do a supplementary and say, yeah, we told you we are going to pilot how this thing is going to work. And so it has worked. We have created this number of jobs. And I mean, this number of, we've built this number of housing units. And these are the people who have been given these housing units because the monies were contributed by this kind of people in the public sector.
So
but
it's
otherwise,
all about
as
accountability.
It is, exactly, which is not being responded to by Kenyans. And then lastly, this has been tested and tried by the former government through the Big Four agenda, which was the housing. Kenya Kwanza, now as a government in place, I think they have a responsibility to tell Kenyans, yes, this is similar to what the Jubilee government used to do, but it's different in this way. And from our audit analysis reports, which is why I spoke about the Presidential Delivery Unit, an M&E structure, monitoring and evaluation, that is able to say, the past government built this number of houses because they promised, and these are the kind of households that have been given these houses. And so as a government, we want to augment this by contributing X amount of money. So we plead with you the way the president was pleading, so that people easily understand and are voluntarily willing to contribute into it.
Okay, Prof, you know, this is a season of retrenchments and profit, you know, wardings. We've seen it happen. And the president terms it as a hustler bill. Do you think it is a hustler bill?
Well, I mean, he has tried to defend it by talking about the issue of the farmers, the number of farmers, the guys who need to be given jobs and the rest. But as I told you that the president seemed not to be able to tell us exactly when to expect this. For example, the one he was asked about the 1st of June, he said he cannot be able to tell whether that will happen or not, but he wants more time. He says, if this finance bill is passed, so if and if was so many. But let me just try to dissect the issue of the finance bill. So I see there's some misalignment I just have 4 points here. There's some misalignment between the finance bill and the bipartisan negotiation. Because bipartisan, Raila Odinga in his Azimio team says they want to give the cost of living go down immediately, and it should be done within, I don't know, 30 days or something. Maybe 1 week, he says so. But you see, if we are being told that we're going to bring cost of living, and the finance bill is increasing taxes, which will increase cost of goods and services. For example, the fuel levy will increase fuel from 10 shillings to 12 shillings on top of what we have. Now, that means everything else will go up. Moving from Rongai to Nairobi will go up from 150 during peak time to around 300. Moving from Githurai 56, is it 46 or 46? 56. Those numbers confuse me. So moving from Githurai to town will also go from 150 shillings to something around 200 or 250. So it's for sure that whenever fuel is increased, there's so-called predatory industries.
Yeah, it's a ripple effect.
They predate on people. Matatu will not say, how do we calculate 10 shillings or 5 shillings addition to real fuel? They'll just say, now let's double the fare.
Yeah.
They will not even mind about those numbers. They don't calculate them. They have no calculator. So I'm saying that will have
they
an
don't
effect.
have any calculator. How do they do the change?
Yeah, so there's what called parallel policy between cost of living and the finance bill. The second thing is that the president has asked us to have what we call focused poverty. Be poor now to be rich tomorrow. But the question is it going to happen in our lifetime? Our grandparents sacrificed so that we can succeed. They didn't succeed. Our money is being stolen in terms of corruption. There's a lot of pilferages. There's a lot of deliberate wastages. Like for me, focused poverty means that my father had to not live a good life, sell his cows and take me to school. But now I'm educated. I can now take care of my brothers and sisters. But that actually happened in a lifetime. These are saying, you be poor and let us be rich later. Yet the government is not being poor. The government is having a very heavy expenditure.
Appetite, yes.
So even this finance bill is addressing the wrong problem. The wrong problem is that Kenya do not have a revenue issue. Revenue has always gone up. What has always gone up too high in a proportion that is not sustainable is expenditure. So let's go and cut where wastages are and work on that. The president tried to talk about it, but he didn't convince us because when you see the real numbers, how much are we saving and how much is going to happen to us. Then also something very interesting here that he talks about how Kibaki grew the economy. For example, from 200 billion taxes collected to around 1 trillion tax collected. And he says trying to do the same. And he gave us figures like we are doing 14% tax to GDP, while other countries are doing 34, 44, and the rest. Let me tell you what, the president has not been very clear on that because President Kibaki did not grow our revenue collection by increasing taxes. He increased the people who are earning money by giving a stimulus in the economy so that the private sector was more vibrant. I saw people resigning from the bank to start their own businesses because the economy was vibrant. Would someone now resign from, for example, Media House, where you are now, or resign from a bank or resign from somewhere to start a business? When you're being told the economy was actually in shambles, they have said the economy is dilapidated. So I'm trying to say that if you give us an analogy of Kibaki, tell us the path he walked. Don't tell us another path which is different. By increasing taxation doesn't happen. But also let me tell you one thing, that let us give some credit to the president for even trying to explain this. In fact, what I'm trying to say to Kenya, don't take the president's word for it, but it's a beginning point for some conversation that actually we need to have. And also something which I want Kenyans to know very clearly is that it is important for us to understand how this economy works. And I try to add Kenyans, why don't we try to look for other ways? And I can tell you clearly that what you mentioned is very important about decentralizing and de-risking Nairobi. When Mandamano took place, I asked myself, what can be Kenya without Nairobi? I realized Nairobi is around 43% of the Kenyan economy. If Mandamano were to take place in Nairobi every day, we should lose 43% of the economy. Why don't we decentralize this economy and put different hubs in different areas? It has happened in Germany. In Germany, without Munich, without Berlin, you can still find Germany economy growing at 0.03%. In Kenya, we shall lose 3%. We have done analysis by finding that some countries, for example, in France, without Paris, 13% of France is gone. So what is happening here is that there's some things which has happened. One, we have globalization. So location does not matter too much. Secondly, we have digital revolution, electoral revolution. You can actually just offer road infrastructure, broadband infrastructure, and decentralize the economy and stop crowding Nairobi. Then you want to solve traffic issue. You want to solve Mandamano issue. You want to solve, it won't happen, it can't happen, and that's why we are losing a lot of potential in the inner cities. And I can tell you, there is a solution for it. Me, I'm trying to challenge you, Gabriel. I'll invite you to discuss Solomonic economic model, which is looking at it's looking at a real solution rather than bashing people.
Okay.
We don't want to bash the president. I'm saying the president is given a platform to discuss.
Okay.
In fact, that's why we're here.
All right, Gabriel.
In fact, decentralizing Nairobi, in fact, it's like you've read the plan because it talks about it. There's a reason as to why, and again, it's in the plan. what the president had said, because I've taken time to read, and it's not only the plan for Kenya Kwanza. I've also read the plan for Osido. The beauty about the industrial parks, in fact, it's what he's talking about.
Which is a Vision 2030 project.
Industrial parks, industrial parks, the way they are opening, you could have probably put them in pen and paper. It was good. It was a white paper. It looked nice. But up to now, this is when we are talking about the reality of things. Why are we talking about the reality of things? The road infrastructure, like Prof has said, it is happening. The GPON, the internet traffic, these are things happening as we speak. They are moving into the machinanis. Now, the question we are asking again, when the president talked about 900 billion of roads that need to be paid, what do you think he was reaching out to? That we cannot continue borrowing, because he's actually very strategic about not borrowing another single cent. So, as much as we want to decluster Nairobi, and I agree with Prof, we must start somewhere. What the president has come in to do is what Kibaki did back then. When Kibaki came into office, he realized one thing, which was actually a genius, a smart move. He realized we had been in a grip of a failed economic theory. Same thing the president has realized. These things have not worked. Let us do 1, 2, 3, 4, and I think we can open some of these avenues to create what he's talking about. So the industrial parks, whether they are in the Vision 2030, they are now being realized. The debt that he's talking about, which must be managed, it's being realized. Yes, the problem again, which Prof has said, and probably I'll just like to dice him out of it, is saying that we be poor now to become richer tomorrow. No. I think what the president is trying to tell us is delayed gratification. That is what worked with Kibaki. When you say be poor now, what you're saying is, I'm just giving money, but I'll never see it again. You don't work like that when you're in an economy like the one we are talking about. This is not only my life, it is my children's and their children's children. Obama tells us a very good line. He gives us a very good line. Let us always imagine that we have borrowed this country from our children, not our forebears. And when you start realizing like that, you're like, hey, wait a minute. If we can sort this debt, let's sort it now, so that our children will be thinking about imagining how to create things here and there. Let us not burden them by continuing to over-debt, to put debt on their shoulders. And I think this is a very good conversation that Kenyans must have. That's why I like when the president says, we have to be sober, we have to be truthful. We may not agree from time to time, but if there's something that must be constant, is that we must all be truthful to one another. And I think moving to where we need to be as a country. I know every time we try to pivot back to saying Kibaki never added taxes. As a matter of fact, there was a serious tax increment. When Kibaki came in, and he talked about free education, there was a lot of excitement. But there's something else that must precede that excitement. Doability must happen. At one point, there was an issue with the donor money, the donors that were funding education. It was highly subsidized by donors. At one point, they cut the funding. Where did that money come from? The president today has just talked about teachers. The number of teachers that are being hired, no other administration has ever put them in class like he did. 30,000 we are talking, and next year we do another number like that. So here you're talking about a grand takeoff that requires a lot of resources. Problem is, we don't want to borrow, because that has never worked in any nation that you choose to point at. We must look at nations that have succeeded. And the president gave a good example on in the OECD countries, where really tax is huge. But then again, you must ask, do we continue this paradigm which has made nations work, where you tax and spend, or do we continue overburdening our children by borrowing and spending to a point whereby governors are drawing up budgets and looking at the national government and said, we want money, yet they don't know where that money is coming from? Should we ask, is it so hard? And this one I also post to my friends. Is it so hard for us to take a backseat and ask, how is our economic health? What the president saw back then, is it not sober for all of us to try and understand where he's trying to take us? Because at the end of the day, I honestly believe sometimes when you're given such a hefty seat, like what the president has, he has a bird's eye view of so many things that we may not be knowing.
Which he talked about intelligence too.
He has the ability to gather intelligence better and in great sights than we have.
All right.
So I think we need to just give him time, because really we've so much judged the man. He's been in office literally not even a year. And we want him to be a Kibaki.
Yeah, 5 years.
It will not
give
happen.
him which time?
All right, so, gentlemen, we have like 5 minutes, so we have to keep this conversation
The beauty
going.
about Gabriel is that is at least seeing some sense in what we are saying.
Yeah.
And the challenge that I think that the government has is doability, which he has also mentioned that the former president, Mwai Kibaki, had. We don't see that in the current, despite the fact that he's been in government for a very short time, because you promise this and we hold you to account, we can't see it, and you keep swinging and changing. And there are so many examples, I think, and even the journalist that was speaking to the president today really tried to hold him to, tell us, what is this thing? But you see, he says, like the gas, if this finance bill passes, then Kenyans will get the 600 and not the gas, is the container. Many things, Hustler Fund, which we were told is free money, now government. So I think the doability, insofar as the Kenya Kwanza government is concerned, is largely missing. And that is purely why Kenyans, for example, I feel so bad that people are bashing the public participation processes on the finance bill. It is a constitutional sovereign duty of the Kenyan citizen to sit and contribute your views, your proposals to government. But people are saying, if you have no idea, then why do you want to do it? Which is not a very proactive and progressive way of looking at it. So the government, in my view, needs to come out very strongly to show something, which is partly why even the communication aspects of what government wants to do vis-a-vis the manifesto. You can't, put what is in black and white against what is being implemented, Gabriel. And that's where Kenyans have a big problem. Of course, a lot of the things that the president spoke about, based on the information I have and experience working with county governments, he ought to have put the county governments at the front desk. Of course, he spent a lot of time talking about health, largely devolved functions, and I agree with him on some of his sentiments about devolution. But I think that the national government needs to also work very closely with county governments to be able to enhance on-source revenue. A lot of these programs that the national government is doing are county government functions, mechanisms. So using a partnership model to strengthen on-source revenue for counties will decongest Nairobi, decentralize, and strengthen other counties. And I've been a proponent of this thing that I normally say, one county, one industry. We used to have an agency called the Transition Authority that did a very good work to bring out the assets that are owned by all the 47 counties, including both capital investments and even the value addition elements that any county in this country needs to be able to either strengthen its industrialization or to be able to have a manufacturing farm. We don't see governments picking up this idea and working with those counties to now be able to create jobs. Because the president spent a lot of time on creating jobs, but the how and what the doability aspect of it is missing from a number of his conversations, not just on the public address that he has issued this evening. All
right, Prof, you'll have the last say. But even as you weigh in the conversation, let's talk about the issue of corruption. Let's not forget, former President Uhuru Kenyatta said we lose around 2 billion daily to corruption. And the government services corruption, I think, every month, 60 billion shillings. If you multiply that, the 2 billion in a month, that would be helping with debt,
Corruption is not a legislative thing. Corruption is not about institutions that need to be set up. Corruption is leadership. And sorry, if you can allow me just to start the corruption, then I'll make my closing
2 minutes.
If you are sitting in London and New York, and you see that we have the President William Ruto, you have Gachagua as the deputy, you have the chairman of KRM Waura, look at their record, look at some of the CSS in this government, you can tell for sure there's no goodwill in tackling corruption. And I can tell you for sure, I will never ever give a scorecard to Kenya Kwanza government on corruption because they never reign on that platform. They run on the platform of hustlernomics. Let's have that one. No, when someone did not promise something, don't check him on it. If Raila Odinga and Martha Karua were in State House, I would give them a serious scorecard on corruption. I can tell you there is no interest to deal with corruption in Kenya. let's focus on other things. In fact, I'm sure that my brother here also acknowledged this one. No. You see, if I didn't promise you something, if I took you to honeymoon and I didn't promise you that you're going to be a happy woman, why do you want to ask for happiness when you don't get it? So that's leave it aside. That one, it is completely, there's no interest. There's no, even he didn't talk about how he's going to do it. He just talked about the issue of adding budget to judiciary. Kenyans are not looking for input, we're looking for output. How many cases have been prosecuted? How much money have been recovered? Uhuru Kenyatta came with the asset recovery strategy that made us recover some money, also made some people suffer like Kideros. You see the guys like Wabayao. So I can tell you, don't waste time in judging Kenya Kwanza on corruption. Let's judge them on how they build the economy, because that's what they promise. Now, I like something about the president today. Unfortunately, I like something about him today, about when he talked about the issue of infant economy. I'm an economist. He said that he has increased taxes in areas where he wants to improve manufacturing. If the president can do what's called doability, this is one of the things that made Korea grow. You know, when, Hyundai car, the head of Korea ensured that Koreans drove very bad cars and very costly cars to be able to build Hyundai car. It happened the same in the US, happened the same in all developed economies. He talks about the issue of increasing infrastructure, percentage of manufacturing to GDP. These are good policies. The only thing is that we are not seeing single decisions being made every day to make things happen. Then I want to go and finish with something which is very close to my heart, which is called devolution. Briefly. Because he talked about it. Let me tell you what, my dear, my most unfortunate thing is that devolution is being given a lip service. Why? If I give you just numbers, devolution took place, we devolved positions, we devolved offices, we devolved officers, then we devolved corruption. We never devolved service. What I mean by here, if I give numbers, do you know that the percentage of investment in health in GDP is around 11.1%? And then if you look at counties, have raised this to 29.9% of the budget for counties to go to health. Do you know that the total budget that goes to health in Kenya is 400 billion? Yet, out of the 400 billion, only 135 billion goes to counties. Yet health is fully devolved. Now ask me, if health is fully devolved to the county government and they're receiving 135 billion, yet 265 billion remains in the national government, what are they doing with it? Is it for driving around? And health is fully devolved, including the health in Nairobi. It tells you there's something wrong here, and counties are getting a raw deal because we are fighting for the right of devolution. In fact, this country, we are being put in a smoke screen whereby we are discussing about Raila and Ruto, yet we are ignoring what should be happening in the county. And for me, this is something that the president needs to come and address it straight with money. Put your money where your mouth is.
30 seconds.
In fact,
30 seconds.
It will actually be less than 30 seconds.
Okay.
And the only thing I'm just going to talk about is corruption. When the president came in, and he's actually again said it quite eloquently, when he came in as president, the first two duties among them three, the first two was to give independence. Economic independence to two institutions, very vital institutions in matters fighting corruption. That was the police and the judiciary. Guess what? It's like me sending you to school, I've gotten a chauffeur for you, I've paid your school fees, and then you still say, I don't want to support your schooling. The mere fact remains, and truth must be said. And I think you need to correct that. The president has said he has never called the DCI. He has never called the police boss. He has never called any person in the judiciary. So we must hold them to task. With these corruption cases, we need to see heads rolling.
Yeah, so we need to know who is failing who.
We want output, we don't want input.
20 seconds.
Giving them money, you want to make them
execute. It's not in the door of the president. Back in the day when people used to say,
let him have his 20 seconds.
We don't have orders from above
Okay, 20
anymore.
seconds.
Yeah, because the Kenya Kwanza government, part of the narratives that they had is economics. I think one of the biggest gaps that we have as a country is a failure to have a standard taxation policy and a tax regime.
That I agree.
So that goodwill from the political class, particularly our parliamentarians, to have conversations about the tax regime, and then government through cabinet to spearhead a clear tax policy for this country.
That is true.
So that it is not a political tool, that now this government is elected, they change it in a way in which they want to fit their, to collect money to meet their investment programs and all service delivery elements. There has to be a standardization conversation around tax regime and also the tax policy.
I know this conversation won't end. Perhaps maybe next Sunday we can continue with it if you're up for it, gentlemen. But thank you so much. We had Gabriel Muthuma, political analyst, Kevin Osido, Executive Director, County Governance Watch, and of course Professor Fred Ogola, who's a governance expert, and Nicola, Director of Trailblazer Business Strategies. Thank you so much and good night. Good night, our viewers.
Thank you very much.